of this regular meeting has been provided by prominently displaying the schedule of this board in the municipal complex and by transmitting a copy of this schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, Trenton Times, the Trentonian, and to Comcast Cable of New Jersey. A copy was also filed with the clerk of Princeton.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Coulson?
Here.
Mr. Davich? Mr. Floyd?
Here.
Mr. Shriver? Mr. Tenenbaum? Mr. Valvanis? Ms. Chen?
Here.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Here.
Mr. Stein?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have some housekeeping work before we start. We have 5 minutes that we need to approve. First one is October 24th, 2018. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? Somebody like to make a motion?
I move approval.
Second?
I'll second.
We have a second?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. January 16th, 2019. Somebody
I'll
like-
move approval.
Okay,
I'll second.
second, okay.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes,
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Yes.
Thank you.
okay. January 23rd, 2019. Okay,
Move approval.
second,
I'll second.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Yes.
Thank you.
okay. February 27th, 2019.
I'll move that also. Move approval.
I'll second it.
Okay,
Mr. Cohen?
yes,
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Thank you.
and the last one, July 24th, 2019.
It looks like there's a correction needed to the opening statement. It still has Chairman Royce.
I didn't catch that.
Chairman Royce is listed
Oh,
under
yeah.
the opening statement. I think it
Yes.
needs to be corrected.
Yes, I think we should. Did you get that, Claudia?
Yes.
Good. Good point. I should have picked that up. Okay, somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move approval.
Okay, second? Okay.
I think she heard you.
Second?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a finding, a resolution, file number Z1919-738, 5 Cleveland Lane, block 7.02, lot 17. Any comments on the resolution?
I'll move approval.
Okay. Second? I'll second it.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Our first application tonight is 133, 135 John Street, the block 17.03, lot 216, and I do not see a file number on it. Oh, I'm sorry. Z 1919-692. So,
I'll note that the noticing is in order and the board has jurisdiction to hear the application tonight.
would you like to make your opening statement?
Thanks. Can you get sworn in? That's all right.
Did you swear from your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Good evening. The applicants are seeking a C1 and C2 variance to permit the installation of a parking area in exception to the required parking setback and impervious coverage requirements. An additional variance for a rear yard setback is required to permit a small gable roof that has been constructed where a flat roof was previously constructed. As property also requires historic preservation approval. Property is located in the Witherspoon Jackson Historic District. Property's in the R4 zone, and it's subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 17A, 254, and 257. Subject property is non-complying with respect to the required 6,600 square foot lot area. The existing is 2,337 square feet. Non-compliant with regard to lot width. The requirement's 60. Existing is 39, and it's non-compliant with lot depth. The requirement's 100. The existing is 59.92 feet. And the house itself is non-complying with respect to the height of setback, the smaller side yard setback, the combined side yard setback requirement of 20. The existing is 3.4. It doesn't comply with the prevailing front yard setback. It doesn't comply with the 35-foot rear yard setback. The existing's 24.2, and it doesn't comply with the floor area ratio. And the impervious coverage is currently 61, or the requirement's 61.5%, and the existing is 69.9%. The property is in the Witherspoon Jackson Historic District, and it was reviewed by the HPC on April 15th and then again on May 20th. The HPC recommended approval of the plans with the following conditions: that the vinyl fence on John Street be moved approximately 2 feet out of the public right-of-way, and if the applicant is approved by the zoning board, the HP asks that they return to the with a planning plan for the area in front of the new 6-foot fence. The gable roof that was built in place of the flat roof was approved administratively by the HPC officer. So the parking variance, they are seeking variance approval to construct 2 9-by-18 parking spaces in the rear yard. The applicant is proposing grass pavers. There's currently no parking on site. The development of these 2 spaces will require a variance for impervious coverage. The max permitted is 61.5%, and the proposed is 79%. And the required parking setback is 3 feet, whereas the proposed is 2 feet. The project will require a stormwater management plan. They've had a preliminary review by John West, the land use engineer, and it's been found to be acceptable. The proposal basically calls for utilizing grass pavers with 8 inches of clean stone, which will provide the required 2 gallons of storage for each square foot of new impervious surface. In terms of the gable roof variance, the applicants replaced a flat shed roof, approximately 9-by-13, which over the 2 rear bedrooms with a gable roof, and the rear portion of the house had several level changes due to the various additions over the years. During the renovation of the home, the interior floors were all aligned to be on the same level, and the installation of the gable roof was necessary to help put all those floors on the same level. And from a zoning point of view, it's peaks higher than the flat roof did, so it's an increase in the degree of noncompliance with regard to the rear yard setback. So the required rear yard setback is 35, and this encroaches at 28 feet. And they've requested consideration under both the C1 and C2. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them. Thank you.
Okay.
Person doesn't start.
You'll have to be
Sir,
sworn.
we'll need
you'll
to
have be
swear you
sworn
in if you would first state your name for the record.
My name is Alex Masood.
And you're the applicant, sir?
Yes.
All right, and if you'd raise your right hand, you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for hearing us tonight. We'd also like to thank Claudia and Derek for helping us with our application. They were really a tremendous help to us. And we'd also like to thank all of our neighbors who have been very patient. We know this construction has taken quite some time. There were quite a few problems with the structure of the house, and it's taken some time to correct all of those. So we really appreciate that. There's been some minor disruptions with traffic and whatnot. So we appreciate everyone's patience.
Is your microphone on? Excuse me. Is your microphone on?
Hello? Oh,
There
got
we
to
go.
say all that again?
There you go.
Okay, thank you to the board. Thank you to Claudia and Derek for all of their assistance. We really, really appreciate that. And also, thank you to all of our neighbors for their patience. We know this construction has taken quite some time. There's quite a few problems with the property, and we've gotten those straightened out, but it has taken some time, and we appreciate the neighbors' warm wishes. A lot of people have said the project's starting to look really good now, so helps to keep us going. Okay, first, a bit of history about the house. The original structure was built about 1850. It was 2 rooms on the first floor, 2 rooms on the second floor, and a large chimney in the center. About 1870 to 1890, we're not sure exactly when, but our architect thinks it's about that time period. An addition was put on the back, basically doubling the size of the house, to add another 2 rooms on the back, first floor, and 2 rooms on the second floor. Now, when this addition was put on, for whatever reason, it was put at a lower level than the first part. So there's 2 steps going from the first 2 rooms to the second 2 rooms. Then, over the years, additional additions were put on. Bump out on the back, an addition on the 135 side in the back corner, and another addition on the 133 side, adjoining 131 John Street, and then also the front porch. We think that may have been 1950s. We're not sure exactly when. But all of these additions were put on the house without really any consideration for what we would say nowadays for the flow through the house. They were just added on. So we've been working to correct all that. Now, in addition, when we bought the house, the property was in really poor condition. The roofs, gutters, and plumbing were not maintained. So there was extensive water damage through the property. There was problems with rot, mold in between the sheathing and what was the original brick insulation. Water had penetrated and there was mold in there. There were also rodent problems and problems with carpenter bees on the back of the house. So, excuse me? Oh, I have some pictures too I can show you. Okay. Also, the foundation is field stone, like typical of many of these houses from that time period. We had extensive tree root infiltration. So here's a picture of some of the damage that was. This is actually the Quarry Street side. There was a large
Sir,
elm tree there.
I'm just going to
Yes.
interrupt you. Did you take all these photographs that you're going to show the board?
Yeah, yes, I
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, and do you know approximately when you took them?
Not exactly sure. Last couple of months
Okay.
over
All right.
the time
and
period.
Do you want to, why don't we label these all Exhibit A1?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, we were just looking to remodel and move in, and then anytime you open up a wall, you find problems. That's additional things that need to be corrected. So one thing led to another, and next thing you know, we're repairing foundations. So you can see the temporary brace in the center. We propped up the house, repaired this wall here. Show you the next. Okay, this is a picture of some of the rot that I was mentioning. This is one of the corners of the house. You can see that's the original framing, and there's actually very little of the post left. So we had to remove all of that and replace it. Here's a section showing part of the fieldstone foundation and then the repairs that we made. We put in cinder blocks to shore up the walls in the basement, and then the new framing is resting on that. Okay, this is how our contractor was able to repair the house without taking down the whole house. We basically had a spider web of temporary bracing on the inside so that he can go piece by piece and remove the damaged sections and then reframe it. So it was quite a bit of work. This is why the project really took so long, taking care to preserve the outside structure and reframe it from the inside out. So here's a shot of what the new framing looks like. It's solid to modern standards, and it'll be safe and good for the next 200 years. So as part of this, as Derek said, we leveled all the floors from front to back. And that's for aesthetics and safety reasons. The more little stairs you have in a house, the more likely someone is to trip, and that's not good. So this is what the house looks like. The inside, it'll be new, and you can see in the back, you can see the original structure is still there, so we've preserved that. So we really haven't touched the outside of the house much. We'd like to re-side it after the interior is complete, but the basic 2x2 rooms and then the separate additions are all in place. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so as far as today's meeting goes, we would like to request C1 and C2 variances for the driveway and a gable. I included in a package some information. The first, I labeled them 1, 2, 3, 4. The first is the report from zoning. The second is our original application. And the third one is a presentation that we gave to the Historic Commission. This is probably the best one to start with for the driveway. And I could show you electronically also. Let's see. That's the wrong one. Okay. We presented this driveway proposal to the Historic Commission, and they accepted our proposal. So, as part of the driveway, in order to account for the rain runoff, we propose using, for the driveway material, a concrete paver. It's basically an open concrete block that allows water to flow through it. Here's an example of this driveway system. This is a house on Linden Street. So you can see it's like a grid pattern of concrete pavers and grasses growing through it. Here's another closer picture of it, so you can see what it looks like. Okay. Okay. Page 2 has the printout from the engineering department. This is from Jack West, the town engineer. This is how we will construct the driveway. We need to have 8 inches of clean stone, as Derek said. That's to create a basin to retain water for runoff. Then there's a filter fabric, and then 1 inch of sand, and then the pavers on the top with the soil. So it's a pretty simple system that'll take care of the water problem. Okay. The next page has a survey. This is page 3. This will show the layout, what the driveway would look like. Okay. So we would need a curb cut on Quarry Street, and then a car would pull in. One car will pull in straight, the other car will pull in to the left. And our architect originally had a straight line on the lower left of the driveway, and then Mr. West said that an S-curve would be much better, much easier for cars to get in and out. So we modified the design for that. Okay. As far as impact to neighbors for the driveway, Quarry Street is a one-way street, and there's no parking allowed on our side of Quarry Street. Cars are allowed to park on the other side. So by allowing a curb cut, we would not be impacting any other potential parking spots for other residents. And the benefit is we'd be removing 2 cars from the street. Okay. And then the final page, page 4, shows a planting design that was requested by the Historic Commission. As Derek mentioned, there's okay. I need to flip the visual. If you look to the left of the driveway, there's a section of fence that would need to be moved back 2 feet out of the right-of-way. And then in front of that, and also on the right side, we would do some plantings to make it greener. So it looks like most of the houses along Quarry Street have boxwood shrubs, so we would do the same, continue the theme down. And then page 5 shows some examples of a boxwood hedge. Okay. Also, as part of this project, we would need to improve the fencing at the top of the driveway so that headlights at night would not impact our neighbor at 131 John Street. And we spoke to them and we asked them what kind of fence they would like, and they recommended the fencing style on page 6. It's basically a simple cedar fence. The Historic Commission requested the use of cedar as a material, and this is the fence that our neighbors like, so that's perfectly fine with us. So this will be high enough to block any headlights as we pull in the evening, so it won't impact our neighbors. Any of you have any questions about the driveway?
Yeah, just to clarify, the fence that you're proposing would go...
I'm sorry.
Sorry, the fence that you're proposing would go on the back of the property, but it wouldn't go on the side? Which?
It would be at the top of the driveway as the cars pull in. It's basically along the property line in between 131 and 133. There's currently a chain link fence there, and that's really not sufficient to mitigate the headlights as cars pull in. So this would be solid and block any light, so it doesn't disturb our neighbors.
That's parallel with Quarry Street then, on the inside
Yes.
property?
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
But
And-
not on the back part?
I'm sorry?
Also on the back part, because I see it says wide fence. It's hard to tell, it's kind of blurry.
I'm sorry, which page?
So it's parallel to Quarry Street between the 2 homes. What about the back of the property? Would it also be fenced? Or it already has a fence?
Yes, there's an existing vinyl fence.
Vinyl, that's what it says, okay.
Is that your fence or your neighbor's?
That's our neighbor's fence.
Okay.
So we're not going to touch her. That's Ms. Satterfield's fence, so we're not going to touch that. And then the piece on close to Quarry Street, that matches Shirley's fence. So what we're going to do is just take that corner and move it back out of the right-of-way. And then for the interior, we propose using the cedar fence. The Historic Commission didn't like continuing a vinyl fence on the interior in between the two properties. They wanted something more natural looking, so that's what they approved.
So within the proposed driveway part, how much will be parking spaces, and will you have any yard left, or will it be all?
Yes,
parking?
there'll be some yard left. There's more at the top of the driveway, is the area where the cars pull in, and there's a strip on the side, and then also at the S curve, there's a piece over there. There's also the area to the right of the driveway, directly at the back of the house. That's open space. So once if it's approved and completed, we're going to landscape and submit that also to the Historic Commission.
Go ahead, please.
Just a question. How many cars are currently associated with this property?
2.
Where are they now parking?
We're temporarily living in the Griggs Farm section. We rented a place while we renovate this property. So we have parking there, but actually the owner of the property sold that, and we're expected to leave September 6th. So we're really rushing. We were hoping to have this all done before school started. We're behind schedule with all the difficulties we've had with the construction, so we're kind of hoping to hurry and finish. But as far as the driveway goes, it would be the same, just our 2 cars.
Where would you have, I'm not familiar with the rules in that part of that neighborhood. Is it permit parking, or is it first come, first served out on the street? Can you park overnight
Yes.
there?
Yeah, there is street parking, yes. We're a resident in town, so we'd have approval for that. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. This will increase off-street parking by 2 places. Is that consistent with the general plan?
Well, I mean, they're going to use one space up for a curb cut on the street, so I guess you could say it would provide, take 1 car off the street.
Actually, you can't park on that side of Quarry, so
Then
we
it
would
would-
not be
then it would take
impacted.
2 off.
We're not taking any parking spaces away from the street.
Thank you.
Did you
Okay.
consider, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the original question was different than what you answered. I think he was asking, when you bought the house, did it come with parking? And the answer to that is actually no.
Right, no.
Yeah, the previous owners or renters did not have parking on site. I think that's what you were asking.
Right, previously the house was rented, and the renters were local workers it was basically in that condition for many years. They're not people that drive cars, but we're going to own the house, live in the house, and we have 2 cars.
Did you consider the possibility, I mean, the driveway is going to take the whole backyard, effectively. I mean,
Most of it, yes.
the driveway is going to
portion.
take most of it's going to take all your open space back there. It'll leave you small space between looks like the rear steps in the driveway, but, effectively, you're going to be using your whole backyard for 2 cars. Did you consider the possibility of putting a double driveway in there? And I understand there's a pole in there, but putting a double driveway in there and only coming into the property about 20 feet?
Well, that would really be problematic for us. My wife and I, we have different schedules. We're in and out quite a bit. That would mean that we'd have to be shifting cars back
No,
and
it wouldn't.
forth.
If the pole wasn't there,
Right.
if the pole was moved, you could have a double driveway that came in, and then you just drive straight into the property without trying to maneuver. You know, the way you have it now, it's going to be, not only is it difficult to get in and out, but you also lose all your open space, or a good deal of it.
That certainly would be nice, but there'd be a couple difficulties with that. First of all, moving the pole. I don't know about PSC&G, when they could actually do that. The other thing is the Historic Commission wanted the cars pulled up as far as possible. They didn't want to see cars parked near the edge, near the sidewalk area. They wanted the cars back farther. So that's why we did this design.
Well, when you bought the property too, there was no parking. You assumed you were going to have no parking, right?
Right. Well, we thought and hoped it would be possible to put in parking. I mean, it's a good idea to get the cars off the street.
But you bought it with no parking.
Right. Yes.
And many of the houses in that area have no parking.
Right. Yes. There are, in our section of town, there's quite a few houses that do have parking, and then there's a few that are row houses that there's no access to the backyard from the front.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a mixed neighborhood.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the car that's going to be on the left as it pulls in. It seems really tight to me if the car were backing out and immediately had to make that turn with another car next to it. Are you assuming that you would have to back into these spots? I'm picturing if you're backing out, you can't start cutting your wheel until you're clear of that car on your right.
Right. The car on the right would have to pull all the way up. And then there's enough room behind that car for the car on the left to turn and come out straight. I think it would be difficult to back in because Quarry Street is a one-way street. I mean, it's certainly possible, but it'd probably be easier to get off the street and come in straight and then just come back out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems tight, but I see, why it's shaped the way it is.
It's going to be very difficult to get that
Yeah.
car out of there.
Yes, it will be, but it's worth it.
Could I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
My name is.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Hi.
Ma'am, can you state your name for the record? Your name.
Oh, Biwa Huang.
And ma'am, are you the actual owner of the house?
Yes.
All right. If you'd raise your right hand, you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Yes.
Thank you.
everything- Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Your time, to hear us, our application. The parking space. That's why I think the parking space is very small. And then when we bought the house, we saw there's a lot there. So, there was rental property before. So all the renter live here don't have a car, so they just walking to the work from there. But we have to walk, drive a car to work. Okay, so we know the parking space is very small, but we are considering. So when we buy, we have to get a small car, cannot be like a big car. So we aware of this. We have our limitation, cannot go for the big car, can only go for the small size car. But at least, we have kids, he needed to go to a different activity. So it will be definitely help us for our lifestyle. Yeah, but we were, considering to have a smaller car to to fit the kind of small parking spot situation. Yeah, thank you.
And also, the driveway, the two sections are 9 by 18. That's standard for a parking spot for a car in a driveway. So it's not by any means undersized. That's the typical size for a parking area.
Derek, I have a question. If you have a home with no parking, you're eligible for a permit to park on the street, right?
One permit.
One car.
One car.
And so basically, if you were to have one car parking on this site, you couldn't get a permit to park the other car in the
If
street?
there's a driveway on the site, you can't get a parking permit.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, board members? Okay. We're going to open it up to the public for a minute.
Okay, sure.
So, does anyone in the audience have something to say about this project? Okay, seeing none. Do you have anything you want to add to your presentation here?
No, do you have any other questions or anything?
Okay. All right. Let's go into executive session and discuss this. Comments from the board?
Parking's at a premium in, the downtown Witherspoon Jackson. I said parking's at a premium, and I think the more, homes that are, rehabbed, the less we're gonna have spaces. So, trying to accommodate, I think, is what we're gonna need to be looking at more. And I think having the grass, the open concrete block is having the open concrete block with grass, I think that's a good, that's better than all, concrete. So.
Could somebody remind me, I'm under the impression that those pavers are not that porous or not, Mr. Bridger, could you?
This is an open block. Picture a rectangle with
I know
a large
what they
hole in the
look like.
middle.
Okay. I'm just,
It's not like there's another type of block. It's called a permeable paver. It looks like a solid paver, but it allows water to penetrate through it. We were thinking of that for our original idea, but the Historic Commission didn't like that. They wanted something more green. So we came up with this solution. So it's kind of like a grid pattern, if you could think of that.
In theory, they're supposed to work. But what
Right.
happens is the soil beneath them gets very densely compacted, and after a while, they don't drain real well. They do have grass between them, and the water will drain in, but that doesn't necessarily mean it'll permeate into the soil. But it's better than just a regular
Again,
hard
perhaps
pavement.
for Mr. Richard, and that is this considered impermeable or permeable?
For the purposes of stormwater, it's considered impervious, but it does work with the gravel under it. It meets their stormwater management guidelines by having 8 inches of gravel, the sand and the fabric filter. It will store the water. I think what Steve's commenting on, and it's common throughout the town, you have houses that have been here for 200 years, all the yards are so compacted that it stores in that gravel, but it doesn't go anywhere if you get a certain amount of rain. So, it's preferable to, whole pavers, definitely.
So when it says there's 79% impervious coverage proposed, that's taking the full area of the driveway? Okay.
Any other comments?
I just have one comment about the, sort of the selling point that it'll take 2 cars off the street. I have a feeling 2 more cars will show up. So,
It'll be quite some time before he can drive.
I don't mean yours. We won't have to wait that long.
Okay, no, it's just us. Our family's using the house, so.
Say it again?
Our family is using the house. So there's no room for 2 more cars. The two. one
No,
will
I
pull up-
just mean
yeah.
other people in the neighborhood.
Oh,
I hope not. That's, I need to park there.
I don't mean on your, I mean on the street.
Oh, okay.
In reality, they can only, they have permits, or, if you don't have a driveway, you get a permit, and are the permits, just out of curiosity, are the permits street-specific? If you have a house on Quarry Street with no driveway, you get a parking space on Quarry Street?
No. I mean, you get
In the
a
neighborhood.
permit, and if there's a space on Quarry Street, you get it. If not, you go to the next street.
Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me, board member. As I know, they don't allow the overnight parking, so we cannot park in the street overnight. And also the parking spot available, that's the waiting list. So it's not like the choice, not much choice for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Do you want to add anything more?
No. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Comments from the board? Motion?
A second.
Whoa, I can't hear because the mics may not be working properly,
there's a
but
couple.
is this motion based on this being a C1 or a C2 variance?
Right.
What's the thought? I think, Mr. Stein, it was your motion? So C1 would relate to the topography, the size, the shape of the lot. C2 is going to be more, is it better zoning? Do you feel it's more visually appropriate? If you look in Derek's memo, you'll see that he has a listing of what the land use statute calls the purposes of zoning, which is normally what we would say becomes the basis for a C2 variance. So I couldn't hear you when you made your motion, that's why I'm asking.
I still can't hear you, sorry.
I'm sorry, move on the basis of the C2 variance?
All right, and then within that, though, are you saying because you feel it is, just looking at it.
Does it really qualify as a C1?
That's why we're asking the question.
I thought
It's
Well, I mean,
it's a drastically undersized lot.
yeah, I mean, it's a question
I
of, do you
wouldn't
perceive
suggest
that
you
as
do a
being,
C1.
as the hardship is arising from the fact that the lot is the size it is in that zone and has that width and depth? So that's one approach. The second approach would be that you feel, no, that's not really the impediment, but you still think that the parking would be an appropriate relief to give the applicant.
Okay. All right. C1?
Seems like a C1.
C1, okay, that's what we,
And
so
so
I
you
I
made a
had,
mo-
I had second, George had made the motion.
Okay?
So we have a motion and a second.
The undersized lot and the hardship imposed by them.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have conditions that are, we have the conditions of the boxwoods, the conditions that the historic preservation, the HPC wanted?
Yeah, I guess
We
we
included
would have
those
The,
conditions.
your application assumes you're going to put the boxwoods in, you're going to put the fencing in?
Right, yes.
Okay, all right.
One more question for you. So those conditions and the C1 variance, I assume, would apply to the parking relief. There's also the gable roof variance, and that
Okay.
needs a rear yard setback deviation. So, Mr. Stein, were you covering that one in your motion as well? And again, do you feel that that's related to the dimensions of the property, or is that more of a, what should we say, visual or design relief? I can't hear.
Sorry. We're having a hard time hearing you, sir. Sorry. We're having a hard time picking you up on the mic if you,
I'm sorry.
that's all right.
I would include the gable in the C1 variance motion,
Okay.
gable roof.
Okay. Michelle, are you seconding?
Yeah, I second.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
No.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Thank you. It's approved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah? Okay. Oh, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Parking in that area is such a killer. I'm not crazy about it either. I understand it's just a tough one.
Good luck.
Yeah, no, I know that. You know, that this the one line that's off of, I can't remember, it's off there. You can access it off of Witherspoon, and there's so many empty spaces now. People have permits but don't use a lot, that people who live in the area can't find a place to park. And that to me is ridiculous, but they have these spaces and they have permits to park it, and they choose not to live. They were eligible for the spaces. And so you go back here at night and it's not full. Meanwhile, people who live in the neighborhood can't find a place to park. So, no, not at all. Okay. Our next case, 21 Battle Road, Block 3801, Lot 10 in the R1 zone. Case file number Z1919-744.
The noticing is in order. The board has jurisdiction to hear the application tonight.
Okay. Derek, would you like to read your memo?
Sure, thank you. Albert and Jenny Internocia, the owners and applicants, owners of 21 Battle Road, are seeking a variance request for a floor area ratio to permit the construction of a new home and a secondary residence. Additional variances are requested for lot width, lot area, height, lot area for the secondary residence, height to setback ratio, impervious coverage, length of the front facade, and distance permitted between the opening of a U-shaped driveway. The applicant is proposing to construct a 7,300 square foot home with a secondary residence. Property is located in the R1 zone in the former Princeton borough and is subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with Section 17A, 227, and 231. Existing single-family use is permitted as of right. Subject lot is non-complying with respect to the required 125-foot lot width. The existing lot is 100 feet, and the existing garage is non-complying with respect to the required 5-foot setback. The existing setback is approximately half a foot. New 7,300 home will feature 4 bedrooms, 5 full baths, 1 powder room, a double and a single car garage, a porte cochere, a patio, covered breezeway, patio, a U-shaped driveway, and a secondary residence is proposed over the single car garage. The D variance for floor area ratio, the maximum FAR is 25% or 5,631 square feet. The proposed FAR is 32.6 or 7,338 square feet. It's a D variance, requires 5 affirmative votes. Applicants should demonstrate that the the site may accept the improvements that are proposed. Other variances are lot width, the requirement's 125, the existing's 100. The secondary residence, in accordance with Section 17A 228, Sec 7, Section B, requires that the lot area be 25% greater than the minimum lot size for this zone. So the required lot area will be 25,000 square feet, and the existing lot area is 22,525. The new dwelling will violate the required height to setback ratio. The requirement's 1.5 to 1, and the proposed is 3.3 to 1. The maximum impervious coverage for this amount of acreage is 29%. The proposed impervious coverage is 35.3%. And the length of a facade facing the street cannot exceed 45 feet without an offset. The existing or the proposed facade will be 46.83 feet. And finally, the U-shaped opening driveway requires a 50-foot setback between the two street openings, and the proposal is 37 feet. And they've requested consideration for the bulk variances under the C2 criteria. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Chairman Cohen, members of the board, my name is Ryan Kennedy. I'm an attorney at Stevens & Lee here tonight for the applicant. They're here in the front row here, Al and Jenny. This is the project for them to construct their home, but not just for them and Jenny's mother. So Derek did an excellent job of unpacking all of the technical things and the floor area request that the applicant has, and it'll be up to my right here, Mr. Kamalik, our engineer. To my left, your right, Peter Dorn, our architect. And we have our professional planner here as well, Beth McManus, who will come up later to give testimony about the variances needed. But the story of this home is a couplefold. One, the needs of the family to create the secondary resident to allow a family member to age in place with them complicates the project, adds some floor area and other complications to the project. It was one of the reasons why we're here seeking this variance. The other very big piece of this, though, is the type of floor area that we're talking about. The home was designed very respectfully to attempt to fit in with the caliber and type of homes in the neighborhood. So while, yes, these pieces and elements like and I'm looking to get the pronunciation here, the porte cochere, the covered driveway, those count as floor area, even though it is not necessarily living space or space that counts, or space that adds to living space or the mass of the actual home. Similarly, the detached garage was something that the code encourages in Princeton. The application and the design respects that and has a detached garage in the rear of the home, but because of the secondary residence on top, the bonus that Princeton code tries to entice people to have these types of garages isn't in effect here. So there's a 300 square foot floor area exclusion that we don't get because the secondary residence is above it. Had there not been a secondary residence, there's a deduction for garage in the rear of the home, which is one of the planning elements that the town is trying to encourage, and similarly, the applicant is trying to respect. Additionally, by pulling the garage back, again, a key element in the neighborhood design criteria that was recently enacted, you do have to have more pervious coverage to get the garage back there. A front-facing garage could still be done in a compliant way, just 16 feet back from the front of the home, but to pull it back in a way that's compliant with the neighborhood, and I think the code's intentions does require that additional space. So the message here is that, yes, the variances are requested and needed here, but not because there's a giant box being built here. It's because the applicant wants to go the extra mile and add these neighborhood-appropriate design elements that count as floor area, but don't add to the mass or the box of the home that's being constructed. One that is being done, well, technically it is going to be a new home built. The applicant has taken great pains, and hear quite a bit from our architect about how the original home at the house here, one, unfortunately can't be saved, but that many elements of it physically are going to be removed and repurposed, from windows to doors to moldings to the very unique front porch element that's benches that are on the home right now. They're going to be repurposed, and the design of the home actually respects and mimics almost exactly the current positioning, lines, and siting of the home, and does an expansion of that site. It's as if the current home was left in place and an addition done. Unfortunately, for technical reasons, it just couldn't be done that way. So yes, it is new construction, but one that is, the applicant has gone out of their way to respect the existing massing, design, and lines of this home that's there, to create something that both fits the neighborhood in design as well as the needs of the family. So with that, I'm going to turn to my right, your left. Well, actually, before we do that, we have one exhibit tonight, a PowerPoint slide. I'll ask that we can mark it as Exhibit A or A1. The slides are numbered, and we'll be going through that as we go with each of our witnesses. So our first witness to my right, Jim Kamalik, he is the project engineer. He also happens to be a planner, but we have a second planner here tonight to go through the testimony. Jim, I'm going to have you be sworn in, and I know you're before this board many, many times, but I'll ask you to very quickly, if you could be accepted as an expert tonight.
Well, I need to swear you in first. Mr.
Yes.
Chmalik, if you raise your right hand, you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jim, I know you're before this board a lot, but can you just very quickly give us your background and credentials?
Sure. A licensed professional engineer, state of New Jersey, in the field of civil and environmental engineering. Been practicing civil site planning for approximately 20 years at this point. I've been qualified before this board several other
You
times.
testified before,
Thank
so I
you.
think we can all assume that.
Thank you. Steal this microphone rather than pass back and forth. I'm going to move, whoops. I'm going to turn off the pen feature here and then move to the second slide. Jim, we're going to start orienting the board to where we are in town. Can you tell us what slide 2 is?
Yeah, sure. The subject property is located at 21 Battle Road on the left-hand side. You can see where it's located. The blue arrow shows you the orientation within the municipality. And then to the right, a little more detailed view there off Springdale Road is the property location.
All right, now we're moving to slide 3.
And slide 3, you can see the overall context of the neighborhood here for 21 Battle Road. Lots mostly very similar and consistent in size. In addition, you'll note that there are quite a few occurrences here on Battle Road where we do have U-shaped semicircular driveways, which is a design element here within the neighborhood on similar sized lots. An important thing to note for this particular lot, which is being the house sort of kept in keeping with the current design and reconstructed along with the addition and the accessory building at the rear, what's being proposed is a rather elongated structure parallel to the sidelines as opposed to a horizontal structure parallel to the street, thus serving on this particular site, and the planner can speak to this a little bit later, serving to minimize and best place the mass of the structure on the lot in a front-to-back elongated fashion.
All right, Jim, next slide.
Here's a tax map just giving you an idea of the overall lot sizes. Lot 10 is the subject lot highlighted here in blue, and generally the lots consist of half-acre lots. This particular slide on the left you can see is the site plan, and I should first, Ryan, perhaps you can highlight with a pen along the left property line on our property is where the existing driveway is from front to back. So the existing access is highlighted here in yellow to a garage at the rear. It's immediate to the property line and to the neighbor to the left. The access to the property will be reconfigured, and it will be relocated to the right with a U-shaped driveway that continues along the right side of the building and the dwelling to the rear. So one of the additions or improvements, at least from a buffering standpoint, is that there'll be some increased green space in that left side yard. The driveway, which immediately abuts the driveway to the left, will be removed. That will be turned into green space. And then the vehicular travel ways will be more consolidated in the central portion of the lot as shown here. The proposed structure, which originally was intended to be an addition to the rear and to the side of the existing structure, basically overlays pretty much the exact footprint on the left side and front facade, or the front building line, to what exists today, and then extends further to the back.
So, Jim, the height to setback diagram that's on this slide, while that shows the proposed, that's also the current condition of the front of the home?
Existing, correct. So if you circle the right side, that elevation 219.5 on the upper right-hand corner of that diagram, that's the existing condition that will maintain in the proposed condition. And then the proposed quote-unquote new addition or additional building mass above which exists today on the left side does comply with the 1.5 to 1 ratio. So there's no exacerbation of that height to setback ratio. Now this is the grading plan. It's a little it's oriented left to right, so you're seeing Battle Road on the left-hand side of your screen here, with the dwelling in the center. What this illustrates is along the two side yards, the one I discussed previously, along the top of the page, we have that green space and conveyance of drainage towards the street, not towards the neighbors, but towards the public facilities, as well as along the other side yard on the bottom of the page. And this second side yard here does include several existing trees and areas where additional trees will be planted, but the driveway location as shown here does serve to respect those additional trees, to maintain them, as well as the drainage paths going from the rear portion of the property to the front. The last main element here on the grading plan is in the center of the U-shaped portion of the driveway. You can see that we have a rain garden stormwater management facility, which is a green infrastructure element in order to manage roof water runoff and runoff from the driveway areas in order to meet the stormwater management requirements for the proposed impervious surface to the limits that are requested for the variance here tonight.
Okay, Jim, this next slide, while we'll get to this again when we have our planning testimony, we just wanted to summarize and take the board through the technical and the bulk variances here that are either existing on the site or are necessary for the project. And, you know, Jim, if you could take the board through that.
Sure. As indicated here on the table, we have a lot area variance where 25,000 square feet minimum is required, and that is triggered by the addition of the secondary residence, which requires a little bit of a bonus lot area associated with it. And the existing property is 22,525, where 25,000 is required. The number 2 minimum lot width, where 125 feet is required in the R1 zone. This is an existing condition where the lot width is 100 feet. This isn't changing. It's just an existing parameter associated with the lot that is non-conforming and that will remain. Additionally, the maximum impervious coverage requirement is 29%. The proposed impervious coverage, based upon the building additions and also the location of the building at the rear and the extension of the driveway to the rear and the incorporation of the U driveway for the egress in the front yard, yields a maximum impervious coverage of 33.9%, for which relief is requested. Again, that coverage is managed and mitigated by the stormwater management facilities included on the plan. As previously testified to, the maximum heights of setback, 0.9 is proposed, where 1.5 to 1 is the maximum on the one side of the building. That's the proposed condition. That does comply. The 3.3 to 1 is an existing condition upon the reconstruction that would remain and not be exacerbated. The FAR, 25% maximum, that was touched on by Mr. Kennedy in the beginning of the testimony, where in this case 32.6 is proposed based upon the architect's volumetric calculations for FAR.
Jim, I believe there's two other not as easily plottable variances. There's the U-shape driveway variance as well as the front facade length variance. Could you just take the board really quickly through what those mean?
Yeah, perhaps we can go to the site plan real quick, one prior. Yeah. So here along Battle Road, where the ends of the U-shaped drive intersect the curb cuts at the street, in this case, the lot is 100 feet wide, which is a non-conforming condition, but a U-shaped driveway is permitted in this particular condition. However, based upon the neighborhood character ordinance, they want to see 50 feet between the U-shaped driveway. In this case, we have 42 feet between the main portions of the driveway, the 10-foot wide straight sections, and as Mr. Bridger highlighted, in between that tapered portion of the actual curb cut, it's 37 feet. So we can still make an adequate U-shaped driveway that again would be in keeping with a lot of the other driveways on the street that have this condition. And this is driven by having a minimum setbacks on the within the side yards, including specifically on the right side, trying to maintain those existing treed areas, as well as having a straight and direct longitudinal access to the side of the building as well as the proposed garage at the rear, as opposed to having an angle or a kink in it if somebody's trying to back out. That can typically be problematic. So those two design elements are really what drove having the ends of the U-shaped driveway just slightly closer together. Therefore, we're requesting the relief. The center of the driveways to one another, they're 52 feet between, so the overall spirit is kept, but relief is requested. The other element that was of relief that's being requested tonight is an architectural design relief that is in the neighborhood character ordinance, and that is where in section 403 2B as in boy, the limits of the length of the facade, of the front building facade facing a street is limited to 45 feet without a discontinuity or a break in that facade. And in this case, the proposed facade length is 1.83 feet, larger than that at 46.83 feet. So based upon the trying to maintain the width, as you can see, of the previously existing structure and match that, that's the way the dimensions fell. Again, it's a de minimis 1 foot deviation there, but still a relief is requested.
Thanks, Jim. Mr. Chairman, or anyone from the board have questions for the engineer?
I don't. Anybody have any questions for the engineer? No, we're good.
Yeah, I do have one question. If the carriage house is designed for someone who's aging in place, how do you get to the second floor?
Good question. I think we're just about to hand off to our architect. Now, something we were talking about earlier today, so maybe I'll After I introduce Peter and start into him, then we'll have him address that, if that's okay.
Fine.
And I guess a question I have, again, explain to me why it has to be cited where it's cited as opposed to farther over. And there's all kinds of houses on that street. And why does it have to mimic
The existing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's another good segue into the design thoughts and the way of respecting the existing home that we can get into with our architect. Excellent question. Not that I want to dismiss him, but with that, I would like to introduce and first have sworn in our architect, Peter Dorn.
Mr. Dorn, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful? Yes, I do. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dorn, if you could introduce yourself to the board, let's go a little bit into your credentials. I know you've been testified in Princeton before.
Thanks. I was here probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I think most of the faces look like, I think Mr. Floyd, Mr. Stein, or Cohen. I think most of you were on the board. It was for 75 Cleveland Avenue when I worked pretty hard in having my client save the building. He was about to tear it down, and I fought pretty hard for him to keep it and renovate it. And
Bring the mic up a little further.
so that was the only time I've been here in Princeton before you folks, and I think it turned out pretty successfully. I remember the historic preservation attorney coming up to me and saying, I had no idea how we were going to save this building, and if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be saving it. So I was happy to do it, and I think it turned out pretty well, and hopefully somebody is going to really enjoy it.
So in addition to your past testimony before the board, you're a licensed architect. Can you give us through your credentials so they can...
Sure. I'm licensed in many states, including Florida, California, New York, Washington, D.C. I think I have an NCARB license, which basically, other than California, allows you to...
I think we can accept you. You
Thank you.
testified before.
Mr. Dorn, you're licensed in New Jersey, though,
What?
right?
What's
You're
that?
licensed
yeah,
in New Jersey.
I'm
Oh.
licensed
Right.
in New Jersey, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Do you need any education stuff?
I think
Okay.
they're graciously willing to accept you
Okay.
again as they have in the past. Thank you.
Okay. So again, when I came to that meeting, it was kind of interesting because there was a case before us, and a bunch of folks were talking about how all the little houses were being torn down, or all the houses that were here in town were being torn down, and the rebuilds were terrible. And a lot of times when I ask clients that call me up that I don't know, I said, well, why are you picking me? And they say, because everything that we see that you do looks like it's old and mature by the time you're done with it. So we're very, very careful about vegetation. What I typically like to do is try to get a client to, if there's a need for a buffer, I say to them, well, if excavations aren't going to be a problem, let's take the back part of the property and let's get our conifers in there, or whatever it is that we're going to do, because it typically gives us a year of maturity before we get started on the project. Secondly, when I saw the house, it seems like it has a good history. It has a great scale. There's some pretty tremendous details. On the Jersey Shore, we do a lot of shingle-style homes, but the flares that are there, they're extreme, but they're beautiful. The Tuscan fluted columns with the attic base, it's beautiful. There are those little details. The cornices are really, really quite nice. There's something very, very nice about a big, strong gable instead of the typical house. The typical house that could be built here, which we could do and meet the FAR, would be kind of a wide and long box that would be probably two-story colonial, that would probably have hardy plank siding on it, and it would look terrible. So what we all got together, the Internoses and myself and Dan, and we said, well, why don't we try to save the house. So we tried, like the chimney that's on the front is a fake chimney that was built, I don't know when, and there's no firebox in it, there's nothing in it. And it's terrible. That's the chimney right there that you see in your slide. But the details of the house are really, really nice. There's a beautiful flair to it. The cornices are nice, but the irregularity of the back of the house was so extreme. By the time we tried to put it together, it just didn't work. So I said, well, why don't we just, we had already designed the house, and I said, well, why don't we just go ahead and take the house down. We'll take everything that we can possibly take out of it. There's paneling on the inside that we can use in the little carriage house in the back. The idea, I mean, you can see those fluted columns. They're absolutely gorgeous. And the bench and all that, like the stone patterns like that, and the little panels underneath the side lights. That's the kind of stuff that we do. And we're fortunate enough that we're the builders as well. So we have, our resources are pretty extensive. So whenever we want to, there's a door company and window company in New Hampshire that we use for things. They make the best doors. So we can recreate almost anything that's out there now. You can see those fluted columns are beautiful, but obviously the bases are destroyed, but we can recreate the base and use those columns somewhere inside. The doors we're going to use in different places. The hardware was all stripped by a carpenter, and any of those things we're going to try to reuse. So the first part of the story is that we tried to reuse the house, and the second part of it is that we couldn't. And then as we looked at it, if we could go to maybe the front elevation of the house, there's a long line of the house along the front. And as Ryan had said, and we looked at it, because we don't just arbitrarily go out of our way to come before the boards and ask for a bunch of variances. We know that's not the most popular thing to do, but we decided to break up that wall with a porte cochere. The nice thing about it is, in my own house, I did a kind of a typical, a similar renovation to this, where the driveway was on the opposite side, but there was no backdrop. And what happened is the scale of everything just got distorted. So the porte cochere is a great way for a side entry, because the front entry really is more symbolic than the side, and we could make it really nice and feel like it's a secondary front entry. And then when we thought about putting the little carriage house in the back, we said, okay, well, we did an open colonnade that connected it, and we did it on right angles, so it created a nice little space that it's open and transparent from property to property. It allowed for wind and light and everything to go through. And then we have a number of terraces that we felt were important. I mean, it's nice to have that outdoor space. The front porch was a way to break up that front facade that Ryan was talking about. I think you're allowed 45 feet, and we're 4610. And we said, okay, well, we'll break it up with a front porch, because the other house had a porch. So if you take the house itself, we could design a house that would meet the FAR pretty closely. But we wanted to create a house that worked for Al and Jenny. And so we took the elements of the house that we had, we took their program, and we put it into a scheme where the massing of the front seemed to be it looks like the same massing that we had before. So, it just, we felt that that would not be an issue where all of a sudden we're pulling the house to the front. We have where we have a 4610 front, now it's a 65 or 70 foot front. We maintain that. And then there's a nice graduation as you go back from front of the house to the porte cochere to the carriage house in the back, and I think it's going to look like it was done a long time ago, and it kind of mimics the way things were done a long time ago. But there's still a lot of transparency, and we didn't want the neighbors across the street to feel like, oh my God, there's this huge house across the street. In fact, the height of the house is reduced by a foot or so, or a foot plus. And then we did everything that we thought we would have to do to make the house a house that's livable for these folks, and be successful in that way, and also be successful in the fact that we weren't creating something that looked new. We're using all old materials for as much as we can, and the step flashings and the counter flashings or through flashings are all going to be copper. The windows are going to be all either simulated divided or divided lights. The front door is going to be a custom front door. All the standing seam roofs are going to be copper. Chimney, as you can see, are stones, and they have really great chimney caps. So pretty much that's it. We didn't go out of our way to try to make something that we're going to have to be before the board and ask for a lot. But we feel that if you take away the porte cochere, the front porch, and a number of the other areas, you'll find that we're very close to the FAR that we're looking for. And I know it's dealing with figures and stuff, but if we were a lot that was 125 wide, our FAR would be a lot less. So that's pretty much what we tried to do.
Before we unpack all the layers of where the floor area comes from, I know whether it was Michael or George, someone asked a question about the. I apologize, I'm distracting everyone by flipping through here, but about the secondary unit and how that works, the relation to the rest of the home.
Yeah, we thought about that, and we made the stairwell wide enough that if we had to, we could have a chairlift in it. Seemed to be the smart way to go. I mean, I think Jenny's mom is pretty healthy right now, but certainly a consideration.
Thankfully, it's not needed now, but could be added
in
the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to go back to the slide of the floor area here before we bring Beth up to talk about the planning considerations here. But Peter, I think what you did here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you unpacked each of these elements, whether it is the additional the age-in-place unit or those architectural elements that put us over the edge to kind of show that it's not the massing of the home that does it, it's these other pieces.
It's the other extraneous pieces that are figured into FAR that bump it up to the 32.56. Again, if you wanted to just deal with the house without the carriage house in the back, we're at 25.4, which is 0.4% off of what is allowed. And again, if the lot were bigger, we would be fine with that. But the attached garage, the breezeway that connects the back, and the porte cochere, which are all elements that are, again, they're transparent. They're architectural embellishments that I think really starts to give a house character and depth to it. It kind of makes it a much more dynamic than just. Again, you could build a house and you could stick a garage, two-car garage on it to the right that would have two garages and face the street. But I don't think that's real attractive. I don't think that's what really, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to achieve.
Do we have any questions for our architect before we bring our planner up?
Questions?
Okay. Beth?
Thanks. All right,
So first,
I'm not actually sure if this is an architectural question or maybe a regulatory question, but if the additional, living space, if that were just on the ground level, no garage, how does that, would it be allowed? Does that change things?
I'm not sure I follow your question. Sorry.
Is there a requirement that it be above the garage, for example? Is that the question?
No, if there was no garage below that space, if it was on the ground level just itself, that would reduce.
Well, you would lose whatever FAR is associated with the garage.
Well, everything goes together, the garage.
Right.
the-
I mean, garages are only exempt from FAR if they're behind the most rear part of the house to the extent of 300 square feet, and they can't exceed 15 feet in height. So that's the second story.
So Eve, what you're saying is if if living area were set aside for the applicant's mother in the house, how would that affect the FAR? Correct?
In the house, or even just where it is, but without the garage.
So would that be a compliant, I'm thinking of your scenarios, would that be a compliant FAR?
It would not. It gets closer, but losing half the footprint of the garage, of the external garage, for example, it gets closer. It wouldn't bring it to 25. So to get to 25, it's the garage completely gone. That connecting space between the two, it's outdoors, but and it's not quite a breezeway, but it's a covered walkway that counts. And then the driveway element, the porte cochere. Thank you. I've practiced that one a lot, and I still don't get it right. But if all of those things were eliminated, you'd be just right about at it. But the magic of, I guess, that garage is almost flipped. If you took that unit off the top, that garage would almost be free floor area. You'd get that 300-foot bonus because it's all the way to the back, it's behind the back line of the home, and there's nothing above it. By putting that unit on top of it, you lose the 300-square-foot exclusion that the town has to kind of encourage those rear garages. But then you wouldn't have that secondary unit.
I think I understand that.
Okay.
So with that, to my right, your left, we have our planner, Beth McManus, from Kyle and McManus, or McManus Kyle. Apologize if I got the...
Kyle McManus.
Right. If we could have her sworn in.
Yes. Ms. McManus, do you swear from your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Beth, I don't believe that you've been before this board, so if you could take us through your credentials.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, I have an undergraduate degree from Rutgers University in Environmental Policy, Institutions, and Behavior. I also have a graduate degree from Rutgers in City and Regional Planning. I've been engaged in the planning profession here in New Jersey since 2001, and during that time, I've spent most of my career representing municipalities like yourselves, but I've also done quite a bit of private work, and I also do quite a bit of work on behalf of the courts. So specifically, I've testified as municipal planner in this role in about 6 counties, including municipalities such as, but not limited to, Clinton Township, Raritan Township, Alexandria, Franklin, Hunterdon, actually Somerset as well, Bridgewater, Piscataway, New Brunswick, Hopewell Township. And
We get the point.
Okay.
You are licensed in the state of New Jersey?
yes, I was getting there, but yes, I'm licensed with my PP as well as my AICP nationally.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So with that, and thank you for accepting her as our expert. So Beth, a lot to unpack here. I've got, it's sometimes helpful to have a visual of the map up while we're talking. We've also got, so feel free to nudge me if you want to have a different visual up here. At the moment, we've got the FAR scenarios and an outline of where they are essentially on the properties. Of course, we've got this list of C variances. I don't think that interests you as much as what she's going to talk about with the floor area, and then the overview of the neighborhood.
Let's stick with the neighborhood map for now. So I'm going to start with some of the lot configuration variances. Admittedly, they're a little bit easier, but I want to get them out of the way just so we can move on to, I think, some of the more important issues at hand. So first, very simply, the lot width variance. So we're seeking variance for this existing condition. The R1 zone requires 125 feet, but our lot has just 100 feet. This is what I would say is a classic C1 variance. C1 variance is, of course, the hardship variance, meaning that that all of you, the board needs to find that there's a hardship due to the lot configuration, such as exceptional narrowness, shallowness, topographic conditions, or other unique situation affecting this particular lot. The hardship here, the unique situation, is literally this existing lot configuration. As I said, we have an existing lot in a fully developed neighborhood where we've got an undersized lot width. And this is not a situation that we can cure, for example, by taking or creating a subdivision for neighboring lots that would allow us to add additional land to our property. And I say that because Lot 9 to the north is also has an undersized lot width, and Lot 11 to the south also has an undersized lot width. So there's no ability for us to address this variance to make it less nonconforming, much less not at all nonconforming. And for those reasons, I think that we are able to demonstrate a hardship. But we're not quite done for this first variance. We also need to address the negative criteria, and for that we have to address the public good as well as the zone plan, specifically whether or not there's any substantial detriment to either of these. For the public good, I'm going to argue that there's not just no substantial detriment, there is no detriment from this existing condition. And that is because not only is it an existing condition, so we're not creating something that's going to have a visual impact, but it's actually entirely consistent with the neighborhood. So as you can see on, is this an exhibit? Is this an exhibit?
I think Exhibit A1.
Okay,
The exhibit.
yeah. On Exhibit A1, the aerial photograph, you can really see that our Lot 10, which is 3 in from the intersection of Battle Road and Springdale Avenue, is consistent with the size of the neighborhood, the lot widths in the neighborhood. In fact, as I said, Lot 9 is slightly smaller than ours at 65 feet, but all of the lots to the south along the same side of Battle Road are also at 100 feet, except for that corner lot at Battle and Lovers Lane, which far exceeds the lot width requirement. So there's no, I don't see any detriment to the public good. To the zone plan, I also don't see any detriment. And this is, once again, because we're dealing with an existing condition that is consistent with the existing character of the neighborhood and the existing lot configurations. And so there's no undermining of the existing zoning ordinance. It's not uncommon to have older neighborhoods be slightly undersized or perhaps oversized, not quite fit the zoning, because at the end of the day, we craft zones to fit the majority of the lots. We can't do it for literally every single lot in an area. I also think that this existing condition or the relief for it would support 2 of the land use goals from your master plan. The first is to preserve the existing character and mix of commercial, residential, and other land uses in the Princeton community. And the second is to preserve and protect the character of established neighborhoods. And I say all of that for the reasons that I just put on the record a moment ago about the width. So that's our first variance. The next one is the lot area variance. This lot area variance, so just as a refresher, our lot area is 22,525 square feet. So we meet the minimum lot size for the R1 district. However, there's a caveat in your ordinance, and that states that if there's a secondary residence, as we're proposing here with the apartment over the garage, the lot width is required to increase by 25%. So what that means for our lot in our zone is that our minimum lot area, presuming the proposed secondary residence, is actually 25,000 square feet. We're at 22,525, therefore we require a relatively small variance. I think that this is a C2 as well as a C1 variance, and I'll go through those reasons. For the hardship, the C1 variance, I offer that because this is somewhat similar to the lot width condition in the sense that this is not a situation that we're able to cure. I can't simply propose a subdivision for some of the surrounding lots in order to create an improved lot configuration or improved lot area here that makes sense. So for example, I can't take land from Lot 9 or 11, the lots to the north and south respectively, while being able for them to maintain conforming conditions. I say that in part because Lot 9 is already just over 20,000 square feet, so that would render a non-conforming lot area. And Lot 11, while that's a bit bigger, if we were able to take additional land, we would really disrupt their setbacks. And I haven't done analysis, but I would venture to say I think it's an impossible condition that we would be able to take enough land from these lots adjacent to create a conforming lot without creating massive variances and problems for those adjacent properties. And I certainly wouldn't recommend taking land from the rear. That would create a really awkward and illogical lot configuration, quite frankly. And it doesn't help the impacts. I also wanted to offer this as a C2 variance. And for C2 variances, these are the sometimes referred as the flexible C variances or the benefits versus detriment variance. And so in order to prove that, the first thing I want to talk about is whether or not this undersized lot actually advances any of the purposes of the municipal land use law. And I think there are two purposes that are advanced. The first is E, which is to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. The second purpose is G, which is to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of uses, including residential, according to the respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. So I say that this undersized lot actually supports these two purposes because the variance is necessitated by the applicant's desire to create that secondary housing unit. The secondary housing unit, as we've heard, is intended to be for one of the applicant's mother. So we're creating a small housing unit that allows for folks to age in place, age with or in proximity to family. But on a larger scale, it also creates a new type of housing opportunity in this neighborhood, albeit at a very small scale because we're talking about one unit. It creates an opportunity for a small household. This is just a single bedroom apartment, and it also does so in a way that expands the affordability, the range of affordability for housing units in Princeton as a whole, but also really more specifically for this neighborhood. So there are a few opportunities to create small apartments in a small scale nature in communities just about everywhere in New Jersey. And so we've been able to, by using honestly, some creative architecture that we heard about today, and I'm going to go through some more as it relates to some of the other variances, we've been able to create this new type of housing opportunity for this particular lot. But in order to do so, we are indeed seeking that lot size variance. So in addition to simply being able to meet the positive criteria for the C1, the hardship, and the positive criteria for the C2, advancing the purposes of the municipal land use law, I also think that, well, first we're required to address the negative criteria, but I think that we can do so, we can address the public good in the zone plan without any substantial detriment to the public good. So first, I think the reason why the municipality requires this larger lot area for the secondary residence is to ensure that there's adequate light and open space on a property, to ensure that that there's enough space on the property to accommodate some of the typical concerns of secondary units like parking and lighting, things along those lines. And as I look at the site plan and as I look at the architectural plans, I'm pleased to see that I think we're able to accommodate all of those issues. So I say that in particular because we are maintaining our front, side, and rear yard setbacks here. So this is not a case of where we're expanding the building footprint beyond that which is intended by the building envelope. And we're also able to put the apartment, the secondary unit, towards the rear of the property, which is also going to further reduce the impact from it, meaning the additional activity, just the noise from people coming in and out of the unit, voices, things like that. It's been pushed to the rear of the property, which is going to reduce any detriment that might be felt by some of the neighboring property owners. Also, I want to be clear that while we're seeking a lot area variance, it's not because we have a lot area that's inconsistent with the character of the area. Now, yes, the lot area is increased due to our secondary unit, but this is not this is not a lot that appears undersized, that that is going to appear cluttered, and in part it's because of the way the building is oriented long ways rather than across the frontage of the property. So some of this area is hidden, and it creates a larger perception of available open space and light across the site. We're also not creating a substantial detriment to the zone plan, and that's because this character of the neighborhood is firmly established and is not being disrupted by this proposal. So again, we're not creating a lot which is undersized. We're not creating a lot that's going to appear too small for the neighborhood, and we're able to add the secondary residence without a loss of light and open space, without a loss of yard areas and the ability of residents to enjoy the property either now and as well as years in the future. I also think that we are supporting four goals of your municipal master plan. The first is to preserve and protect the character of established neighborhoods. And then there are three, that was a land use goal, there are three housing goals that are supported by this particular variance. The first is to provide for present and future housing needs in the Princeton community while retaining the small town quality and diversity of life within the community consistent with the vision of Princeton. Next, ensure the new housing development does not have a negative impact upon the natural or man-made environment within Princeton, nor should it place an undue burden on existing infrastructure and roads or negatively impact the quality of life. And last, higher density housing opportunities for affordable and senior housing should be provided in areas where the impact on Princeton's quality of life, traffic circulation, schools, and transportation can be minimized. The incorporation of this one housing unit supports all of these goals by creating this additional housing opportunity and doing so in a way that doesn't disrupt the neighborhood and doesn't disrupt the visual or the functional environment of this particular neighborhood. So with that, those were I would say those are the two easy variances. I'm going to jump right into the FAR variance at this point then. So our FAR variance is actually a bit different, as I'm sure the board knows, but give me one moment to review it. We don't have a traditional positive and negative criteria that we do, for example, for a regular use variance, like a prohibited use, or positive and negative criteria that we have for, say, the C variances. Instead, our courts over the years have indicated that a different approach is necessary for FAR variances. And so here we start with the positive criteria once again. And so the question is not simply what purposes of the municipal land use law are advanced or anything along those lines. Instead, the question that must be asked and answered is whether the site can accommodate the problems associated with the proposed use with a larger floor area than that which is permitted. And so the first question that comes to mind is, at least for me, why is it that FAR is regulated? And why is it regulated for residential homes? Because the FAR takes on different purposes when we're talking about, say, an office complex versus a single-family home. Municipalities regulate FAR for single-family homes to really keep the scale and the character of the development in check. Quite simply, you want to make sure that new or expanded homes are consistent in character and scale to that existing neighborhood. Nobody wants to see homes torn down and have a large monstrosity built in its place. There are too many neighborhoods around the state that have had that experience. And here in Princeton, one of the ways that you've approached this is by limiting the FAR. And I think that we're able to request this increased FAR without disturbing those principles that the community has put forward. So in terms of those impacts, that keeping that development scale and character in check, essentially, I think that our application has been able to do that in a few ways. So first and foremost, a lot of this FAR is really hidden from the public view. And that's because this is actually, can we go to the lot plan? Site plan. Yes, perfect, perfect. So as you can see on the exhibit that we've got shown right now, this is not a situation where we've taken a proposed building and created a wide building envelope that takes the larger facade across the frontage of the property so that the majority of the building bulk is visible from those traveling or living across from the site on Battle Road. Instead, this is a development design where we've created a building that is long so that much of the floor area is hidden from the Battle Road residents and motorists by creating the building bulk along the length of the lot rather than the width. And so as a result, we've had much of this floor area that is literally hidden from the street. We've also done this by placing the garage at the rear of the building, at the rear of the site. And so while, yes, the garage is clearly going to be visible from the street, it really reduces the prominence of it and reduces that, again, that visual impact by pushing it back, making it appear smaller from the frontage of the site. Additionally, that garage is going to be obscured in part by the porte cochere. While the porte cochere does add to the FAR that we need relief from, it actually serves also as sort of a mitigating factor from the more prominent type of FAR located on the site, which is literally the garage with the second-story apartment that has 4 walls. One of the things that we heard from the architect testifying earlier is that there's quite a bit of, I think, transparency was used in this site design, and transparency for some of the components of FAR, and that porte cochere is one of those. That's a great example of having this transparency. While it, from a regulating standpoint, it appears or acts just like a portion of the main building, something with 4 walls and a roof, but instead it has a very different appearance and very different impact on the site because it is literally transparent. It doesn't have any building mass or bulk to speak of that's going to add to the perception of that being located on the property. In addition, the other thing that helps to mitigate any of these impacts from the FAR that's relevant to the particular site is the presence and also the retention of a variety of trees on the property. And that is on the grading plan. Yes. So on this plan, you can see there are a number of existing trees that are proposed to be retained along the northern property line as well as the western property line. But in addition to that, there are also a number of proposed trees as well. And so that's going to help soften the view of the site in general, and it will also help soften the view from some of the neighboring properties as well. Additionally, I'm sorry.
The trees are coming out. Trees will be taken out.
I'm sorry, if there was a question, I didn't hear it.
I was just asking about the axes. Those are trees that are going to be on this.
I don't mean to testify, but this is also the tree plan, so those are trees that would be removed as part of the project, yeah. Or ones that are beyond, I don't think it's necessarily just removal, but ones that need to go because of conditions as well. Conditions of the tree, I should say. Health.
Can we go to the area? So the other consideration here is that the floor area proposed here is not inconsistent with the floor area seen around the neighborhood. So we are at roughly 7,300 square feet, and there are a handful of homes shown on this exhibit, those highlighted in yellow, that are actually at a floor area that is larger than that which is proposed here. So again, we're not creating a new situation in the neighborhood, and we're not exacerbating the size of homes in the area. So just for some examples, block 10604, lot 9, has a floor area of 9,400 square feet. Also, block 3801, lots 2 and 3 have floor areas of about 16,000 and 9,800 square feet, respectively. And block 10604, lot 1.04, has a floor area of about 8,800 square feet. So there are some examples in this existing neighborhood that are not,
What are the floor area ratios of those?
Yes, that is perceptive. I I must admit that the floor area ratio of those homes are lower than what we're proposing here. And so I want to be, I do want to be clear. I don't want to confuse the issue. I'm not trying to suggest that there are floor area ratios in this neighborhood that exceed what we're currently proposing. But the mass of building on a variety of these lots is equal to or greater than what's being proposed here.
Yeah.
So for our FAR variance, that's our positive criteria, essentially addressing what some of these impacts are and how they're accommodated, how they can be accommodated or how they're already being mitigated by our existing site or the design that's being proposed. We also have a negative criteria, of course, that's got to be addressed. But that's, again, not a typical negative criteria. Instead, for an FAR case, the question that must be asked is whether the condition imposed upon an application whether or not the FAR, whether there are conditions that can be imposed to prevent a substantial detriment. Sorry, I'm gargling my words a little bit. And so that's the question that must be asked, but before we get there, I want to suggest that I don't think that we're creating a substantial detriment that's in need of additional conditions, of additional design considerations, other than that which has been considered for the site design and for the architectural design. And I say that in part because we're not creating a building mass, building bulk that's out of character for the neighborhood. As I testified to, there are a number of homes, but not floor area ratios, that exceed that which is being permitted here. So this is not a situation where the proposed home is outsized for the neighborhood. Yes, we have a ratio issue, but the home itself is not going to be out of character with the homes in the surrounding neighborhood. Additionally, we also have been able to mitigate the visual impact from, again, those plantings and from the building configuration, essentially creating a long rather than a wide building across the frontage. And we're also able to mitigate this, again, because of this transparency and some of the particular components of the FAR, including but not limited to that porte cochere and the porch. These are pieces of the building which certainly contribute to FAR, but they have much smaller impact than the four walls and a building type, 4 walls and a roof type of FAR that I talked about. And this is to the point where if we are able to, just to think about that one exhibit with a variety of FARs. As I look at this FAR exhibit, what I can see is that we get pretty darn close to the required FAR, the maximum permitted FAR, without the porte cochere and without the garage. And I say that not because these are not important parts of the building, because they really are, but because these are the portions of the building's FAR that I really think have a much smaller impact on the appearance of the site and how the site is going to function. Again, we've got this transparent portions of the FAR from the porte cochere and the porch, and then we've got this garage that's pushed all the way back. And so just by virtue of its distance from the street, but also having the porte cochere, which will be the more prominent view of that subset of FAR located close to the street. I really think that this FAR deviation, while significant in terms of number, is not going to read as significantly from the street and from the neighboring properties because of really because of the care and the individual components, the care of the architectural design and the individual components that contribute to it. Because a building, I mean, let's be honest, in the most extreme example, a square building with this FAR, which would have a much greater impact. But instead, we've really taken care to reduce the perception of building mass and bulk to the maximum extent possible.
Beth, would it be fair to say, as I'm listening to your testimony, a big chunk or bucket of the FAR request is the secondary residence for the family member aging in place, and that another bucket of that is floor area that is actually mitigating that floor area? So the porte cochere while counting as additional floor area, making the numbers appear worse, actually mitigates against the floor area request for the garage. Is that fair?
Yeah, it serves, oddly enough, that piece of FAR serves as a visual mitigation of the garage at the rear.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't understand that.
I want to be careful not to get too close to testifying. But I guess the comment that I picked up was that Beth was talking about how some of the architectural elements that count as floor area are in fact mitigating factors. They're helping to mitigate the floor area to the rear of the property so that the porte cochere, which counts as floor area and requires a variance, actually is a visual element that hides the garage and the secondary residence, and almost is a, while again making the variance larger, and from a numbers perspective, is part of the mitigation for what we're really asking, which is the secondary residence.
It hides it, but it doesn't make it go away. I mean, it's still there.
I'm sorry, that's the same element that you can see through, and that's
Yes.
that's an aspect. So it doesn't mitigate seeing it. It doesn't mitigate the impact. That's,
Can we go
no.
to the front elevation?
No, it doesn't.
No.
It's,
Yeah, right there. The point that I'm trying to make, and that Mr. Kennedy is trying to put more eloquently for me, is
And failing, I believe.
is the garage is part of what contributes to that FAR, and that is the more visually prominent type of FAR in the sense that this is a building that is not transparent. It has those four walls and a roof, so it's very much visible. But the porte cochere, which is, albeit part of the FAR as well, is a transparent building feature in the sense that you can literally see through it. It just has the columns and the roof above it. And because of that transparency, and because it's placed in front of the garage, what's going to happen as folks pass the site or folks admire the property, their eye is going to be drawn to that porte cochere first, because that is going to be the more visually prominent piece of building. And so that more visually prominent piece of FAR is transparent. And so as a result, your eye or somebody's eye viewing the site is not going to be met with a building wall facing them. Instead, they'll be met with this transparent envelope, transparent building component, which is going to be the porte cochere. Is that helpful?
I think,
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
we'll discuss it, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So with that, I'm going to move on to some of the other variances, unless there's anything else to pick up on the FAR for now. Okay. So next, let's do the building height to setback ratio. So again, we have a requirement of 1.5 to 1. We are proposing 3.3 to 1. The most important feature about this variance is that it's the existing condition. It is not literally the same building wall, but it is the if you look at the regulating table, you see a note that the existing building height to setback ratio for this southern lot line is the same as that which is proposed. So in addition to that, in addition to it simply being an existing use, I also want to propose that this is a C2 variance. And I say that because there's one purpose of the municipal land use law that's going to be met here, and that is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. And that's because this project facilitates removal of this unkempt property, this building who, as we heard this evening, unfortunately was not able to be retained for this purpose. But instead it facilitates construction of a new home, and we're able to mimic much of the architecture and to some extent some of the site design features, including but not limited to this particular building wall or the building height to setback ratio. In addition to that positive criteria, I also don't think that we have a substantial detriment to the public good. And I say that in part because it's an existing condition, so there's no visual impact, there's no change from from this height to setback ratio because, as I said, it exists today. But in addition to that, any visual impact that might result is in part mitigated through the architecture. We see that through the gable roof and through the windows in this area, such that there's not a blank wall facing the adjacent property. Instead, this is a building facade that we've taken great care to provide some architectural interest and really, just frankly, a pleasing appearance for the neighbors. We're also not creating a substantial detriment to the zone plan. And I say that because we're not undermining the intent of the zone. Again, we're not exacerbating an existing condition. We're simply retaining that which was previously constructed, retaining the regulating condition, so to speak, as to what was previously constructed. I do think that it also supports one of your housing goals in the master plan, and that is to ensure new housing development does not have a negative impact upon the natural or man-made environment within Princeton, nor should it place an undue burden upon existing infrastructure and roads or negatively impact the quality of life. And it's because of that existing condition, it's because of the care in the architectural design that I'm able to say that this housing goal is indeed supported. So ultimately, we have to sort of go back to what are the benefits versus detriments. And the benefits are an improved site with an appealing character. The detriment is the potential for excessive bulk located adjacent to Lot 9. But instead, we have a situation here where the benefits are outweighed because we're not creating an existing condition, but more so also because we're creating an interesting architecture. So we're able to not exacerbate the existing condition and to do so with an improved face that will be oriented towards the neighboring lot. Next in our list of variances is the impervious cover. So we're required, or maximum required is 29%. We're at 33.9%. This is also a C2 flexible or benefits versus detriment variance. And I say that first, asking what are the purposes of the MLU that are advanced, and that is purpose I, which is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. So this purpose of the MLUL is supported by our request for relief because the request for relief really helps facilitate our proposal to eliminate an unkempt property in this neighborhood and to replace it with one that's much improved with appealing architecture and also better suited for more modern living. And part of what's contributing to this impervious cover are really those things that I think are good about the site. So that includes, but isn't limited to, the driveway, which serves a garage at the far rear of the property. By pushing that garage to the rear of the site, it actually expands the amount of impervious cover that's necessary so that we can just literally move the garage beyond the rear of the home. In addition, we also have expanded impervious cover because of this circular driveway. And so the circular driveway it's a nice design feature. It certainly looks nice for upscale homes, but it also serves an important function here in that it's going to allow for elimination of sort of jockeying for driveway spaces. As cars are coming in and out in the morning or in the evening, we've got an opportunity for vehicles to sort of back down, rather than having to back down the driveway, perhaps move your wife's car or your husband's car as you try to leave in the morning, but instead folks have the opportunity to use that circular driveway. So not only is it a positive design feature, but it's also a positive function for the site as well. And both of those two things contribute towards the need for an impervious cover variance. In addition to the purposes of the MLUL, we also need to address the public good. And so I don't think there's any substantial detriment to the public good. And I say that because the impervious cover in part does not have a prominent visual impact. So this is not a situation where the applicant is proposing to pave a substantial portion of the front of the site so that it's going to have more of an urban appearance than would be appropriate here in Princeton. Instead, we have a lot of the impervious cover located towards the rear of the site, in part because, again, the way that building is oriented long ways rather than wide, and in part because of as the driveway extends to the rear and some of the patio areas that are tucked behind the building. In addition to that, we're also mitigating any of the negative impact that might occur from impervious cover, and that's at least in these types of situations, that's related to stormwater management. And so, yes, we're meeting the stormwater management regulations. We heard that from our engineer. But in addition to that, we're also proposing a rain garden. And that's important because, I mean, yes, it helps us meet our stormwater management requirements and do so in a way that I would say is more positive than the typical gray water or gray standards. We're talking about pipes, but we're able to do so using green infrastructure. The rain garden, I think, really serves double duty in this respect, though. So not only does it serve a functional purpose of helping address the stormwater runoff that is going to occur from the permitted as well as the portion of the impervious cover that exceeds that which is permitted, but it also has a mitigating visual impact in the sense that we're going to be creating a place for wet tolerant plants and flowers in the front yard. And so it will, I can't say it's going to screen all of the impervious cover for obvious reasons, but I think it's going to have a softening appearance on the site. So it's going to add to the greenery on the property and really soften just simply the building improvements as well as some of this impervious cover that's proposed for the property. I also don't think that we're creating a substantial detriment to the zone plan. I don't think that we're undermining the intent and the purpose of the zone, and I say that in part because we're able to meet the stormwater regulations, but also because we're able to mitigate any visual impact from the impervious cover for all the reasons I just went through on the public good. Most importantly, we are meeting those stormwater management regulations. I also think that we are supporting one of your housing goals, and that is ensuring that new housing development does not have a negative impact upon the natural or man-made environment within Princeton, or creating an undue burden on existing infrastructure and roads, or negatively impacting the quality of life. We're able to add this impervious cover without creating a negative impact on the natural environment through our stormwater management techniques, or on the man-made environment, again, through the way that the impervious cover is visually hidden or softened because of the particular site and design features. And for those same reasons, I also don't see any impact to the quality of life in the surrounding area. And so for those reasons, I think we're supporting that purpose. And so all told, for benefits of versus detriments for C2, the benefit is creating an improved site with an appealing character and being able to utilize this impervious cover in a way that helps the site function. The detriment would be potential for problematic stormwater runoff. But again, we've been able to mitigate that and address that through our stormwater management compliance, including but not limited to that rain garden. So I have just two more variances. The next is the U-shaped driveway. So Princeton's design standards require a 50-foot distance between the two driveway intersecting points of the street, whereas we're at 37 feet. We are promoting Purpose I of the municipal land use law, which is to promote a desirable visual impact through creative development techniques and goods. I need water. Give me 1 second.
Is one of the negative elements of the variances is the amount that our planner has to speak, so thank you for bearing with us.
Sorry. Okay. U-shaped driveways, 37 versus 50 feet. We support Purpose I of the municipal land use law, desirable visual environment. Now, I say that for a few reasons. First, one of the things that I want to be clear is the one reason, and can we have this back up? One of the reasons why we necessitate this variance is in part because we're removing that existing driveway. So if you remember from the very early part of the testimony, are you going to do it again? our existing driveway along the southern lot line is being removed. So certainly utilizing that would allow us to widen these driveway intersecting points, but we've opted not to so that we can, well, first in part to relocate the garage, but also it removes impervious cover adjacent to the neighboring residents, and so it's going to reduce the impact upon them and also give additional light, air, and open space to this particular property as it relates to the neighboring sites. Additionally, the driveway configuration at the 37-foot works best because in order to other options to create that 50-foot separation that's necessary would require that the driveway essentially bow out, if you will. So it would bow out along the northern property line. If you look on this plan, you can see the gas line running directly adjacent to the right side of the driveway. And so we have that. We also, if you recall from the grading plan, we have a number of trees along that property line as well. And so moving that driveway to a compliant condition is going to require one of two things: that we increase the impact to the property to the south by creating that driveway and all of the associated activity closer to their property line, or we're going to be disrupting some of the really nice environmental features on the site, which are these existing trees along the northern property line and our ability to plant additional ones. It also allows us for a more allows us to create a more logical and safe configuration of the driveway, in that when folks are backing out of their garage, they can simply go straight back and not have to follow a winding or a maybe not winding, but a curved driveway as they try to meet that 50-foot distance requirement. Also, I want to note that a conforming 50-foot distance would actually increase the impervious cover a little bit, since we'd have to create a wider loop at the top, and so that would increase that a bit. Additionally, I don't think we're creating any substantial detriment to the public good, because first of all, it's a driveway type that's not foreign in Princeton. There are a number of circular driveways in the surrounding neighborhood and in the community at large. So this is not a unique condition. In a lot of municipalities, I have concerns about circular driveways as being out of character, but we're not creating something that's out of character here. We're able to do so and limit the impervious cover on the site, and also limit the necessity to remove trees by keeping this driveway circular driveway a bit more narrow than the code requires. And lastly, I don't think that we are undermining or creating a substantial detriment to the zone plan. And I say that because, again, we're not disrupting the character of this R1 district. We're not creating an unsafe condition here. And also because we're, again, supporting a housing goal, which is to ensure that new housing development doesn't have a negative impact on the natural or man-made environment, nor should it negatively impact quality of life. And so we're able to create this driveway in a way that's pleasing to the eye, that's consistent with the character of the home, and limits the impact, the physical impact on the property. And I think we're also able to do so without creating a cluttered appearance. It's not. I don't view this 37 feet distance as something that is simply too small to warrant a circular driveway. It doesn't create a cluttered site frontage. So our last variance is the length of the street-facing facade. The maximum permitted is 45 feet. We're here to propose and to request relief for 46.83. So we have a deviation of 1.8 feet. I'd like to suggest that this is really a de minimis amount, less than 2 feet. Notwithstanding, I do think that we meet the C2 variance criteria because of our advancement of purpose I, again, for the MLUL, which is to promote a desirable visual impact through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. And I say that because at the end of the day, the limitation on the length of the street-facing facade is intended to limit the amount of building mass in bulk, to make sure that you don't have large, uninteresting building facades facing the street. And I think that we've really addressed this here in a different way. So we've done that by introducing a porch and a variety of other architectural elements that you see, such as interesting windows here that really breaks up the appearance of the facade, more so than what I think a conforming facade could be. So we've been able to create an improved building facade, an improved appearance from Battle Road than what a conforming building might actually look like. And so for that reason, I don't think that we're creating any detriment, much less any substantial detriment to the public good. Again, we're creating building architecture that is really quite pleasing and achieves the intent and the purpose of this regulation. And I don't think that we're creating a substantial detriment to the zone plan either. Again, this is a de minimis item for relief of less than 2 feet. And for that reason, I don't think it's undermining the zoning ordinance. But in addition to that, I still think that we're supporting this housing goal of not creating, ensuring that new housing development does not have a negative impact upon natural man-made environment or a negative impact on the quality of life. And so we're able to create this new home in a way that that is not undermining the environment, not undermining the intent of the zone district, and not leading to a degradation of quality of life for this particular neighborhood. And so for benefits versus detriment for this particular variance, benefit is we're creating an improved site with a really appealing and quality site character. The potential detriment is a boring or a bulky appearance, and I think that the benefits far outweigh the detriment from due to this with this de minimis variance, due to the quality of the architecture is leading the charge for outweighing any potential concerns about building bulk and mass. So with that, I've gone through all of the variances, but I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Okay, I'd like to suggest we take a 5-minute break. Okay, thank you. Okay, can we start again? Thanks. Thank you for allowing that break. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so...
So that's our formal testimony in chief. I know we're in a tough spot because there's only 6 of you tonight, and we need 5. We'd certainly love to hear from the public and try to get, to the extent we can, their pulse and yours to see if we're going in the right direction, if that's amiable.
I just wanted to see if I don't know who this would be addressed to, but it's about trees on the site. So, I mean, it appears 9 trees are being removed, 6 are being replaced, but one of the trees that is being removed, and I think this deserves a discussion, is that on this street there's a very prominent array of sycamore trees on both sides of the street. It kind of frames the streetscape. So, and then the north side of the driveway will result in the removal of that tree, which is in the public right-of-way. So I would just like, I don't know if it's the engineer who could speak to the trees, but that would be something I think the board should hear about.
You're talking about the one tree that's in the driveway?
The one in the front, yeah, I was going to ask about that.
You want to highlight this tree here? So just to summarize, in terms of the tree removal, we tried to minimize the overall tree removal as much as possible, with 14 trees to be removed, 6 to be compensated on site. If we can fit a few more on site, we're certainly willing to do that. And then beyond that, a contribution would be made to the Shade Tree Commission in accordance with the ordinance requirements in order to satisfy the tree removal. The one sycamore that Derek was speaking of is highlighted at the driveway location in green. As you can see on the exhibit above, it's right in the location, unfortunately, of where the main driveway into the site is located. And again, unfortunately, it's off property. It's within the town right of way. But to avoid that, the driveway would have to be moved substantially, either to the left or to the right. If it's moved substantially to the right, it'll impact more trees along that right property line. As we discussed before, if it's shifted to the left, then the alignment gets disrupted as you go from the front driveway, the curb cut, to the rear of the site, and then you start impacting and making the circular driveway even narrower as part of this layout. So we did look at that, and the other driveway that we're proposing is between the 2 sycamores on top of the plan, so there's no tree removal there.
I have the applicant here. He has not been sworn in, so let me let's do that if that's.
Sir, would you state your name for the record, please?
Albert Intronosha.
And if you'd raise your right hand, you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, the purpose of me coming, I just want to say thank you first for everyone, their dedication here and taking the time to listen to this. We put a lot of heart and soul into this project, and we hope it has fair consideration. With regards to the tree in question, we had the town arborist come out when we first purchased the property to evaluate all the trees. And that particular one that's marked there has a hole in the tree, and she determined that it was not going to be lasting long and had recommended it be removed.
It's not in good shape.
It's not in good shape. We've done a lot since we've purchased the property to try to help nourish the ground by doing different things to increase the chance of success, but that tree's gone. Okay.
Okay, anything to add? Okay.
Did the arborist say that she would be recommending that it be taken down by the town anytime soon?
It's on the list to be taken down, and they have an order process we've explained. And they did take some trees down on the property and took and trimmed another tree, but my understanding, we don't know when it's going to happen, but it's on the list to come down.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So what when Derek started asking that question, what I started to say is we are at a bit of a deficit here tonight. We wanted to make sure that the neighbors who are going to come could be heard rather than just pass this off for another evening, but we do need 5 votes from the 6 of you. So certainly want to make sure that when we reserve to be able to address anything that the neighbors have, any members of the public to say, and any final comments or ability to address anything that the board is thinking would certainly be appreciated by the applicant.
All right, so you have no other comments right now?
No, thank you.
Well, I guess we can hear from any neighbors that are here right now. Does anybody, well, before we stop, any of the board members have any question of any of the witnesses this evening? I just have one with regard to the engineering, and I should have asked. When you, with the driveway configuration at the rear of the property, in the secondary residence, you're taking out the tree adjacent to the driveway that's on the property line. Are you assuming that somebody coming out of that garage is going to make a turn there, going to back into that area? Well, how are they going to turn around? They're not going to back all the way out past the front of the house and then use the driveway. That's a long way to back out. Huh?
There is a bump out on each side for
Yeah, but it's
a car
pretty
to be
small.
able to turn around.
It's pretty small. I mean, if you feel that they can do that, but it's
Yeah, it would have to be done in multiple movements, but it's possible to do. It's certainly greater than 25 feet.
Okay. It would just look.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the only question I had. Obviously, moving that driveway closer to the property line would affect the impervious coverage and things like that. But it would look to me that that would be a practical situation there. Okay. Anybody have any?
Nothing has been said about the 4 air conditioning units and the generator. I assume they're, especially the ones on the left side, are in compliance? Are they?
Have to be
not
5 feet away, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, anybody in the audience like to speak for, against, make a comment on this? Please come forward.
Hello.
Yeah.
My name is Seth Brightman. I live at number 9, which is on the side where the driveway is proposed here.
Mr. Brightman, we just need to
Yes.
swear you in.
Sure.
Do you swear affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I met Al and Jenny, and looks beautiful. Congratulations. It looks like looks like you put a lot into it. It looks amazing. The thing that comes to mind the most, the tree, of course, and the nature of the neighborhood, but and also I think it's great to take care of your parents. I just want to understand the impact of having a rental unit in the neighborhood, just what the thoughts are around that, the long-term implications of what it means for the neighborhood. I also think that there should be housing for everybody, but I just want to understand what that means to our neighborhood, and if that means we'll all be able to do that, or what are the thoughts of the board around having a rental unit?
Well, I mean, from an ordinance standpoint, a secondary residence is allowed in the neighborhood, provided that it meets the criteria, which the planner did discuss. The lot area has to be a minimum of 25% over the minimum lot size, which in this case is 25,000 square feet. A lot is 22,500. And the idea behind the secondary residence is to do what they're proposing to do, you know, which is a family member, a senior citizen, you know, somebody who, you know, may or may not be related to the applicant. But the idea is to create this alternative additional housing stock in the community. I mean, but again, I think the planner went through and discussed it, and I think Derek can really add to it also. But it's something that's allowed in this zone.
The other requirement is the owner of the property needs to either live in the house or the apartment. It has to be owner occupied, so. And
Thank you.
There's other constrictions I'll tell you about if you want to call my office about number of habitable rooms and.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay. Anyone else like to speak? Okay. So that'll close the public portion of the hearing. Do you want to sum up here?
I do, and if you give me 30 seconds to confirm with my client before I do that, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So first I want to thank the board for hearing us out tonight, especially at the end of summer. I know it's a tough thing as a volunteer to be here and not with your families and on vacation, so very much appreciated for you guys being part of this process and doing this here tonight. Jenny and Al and their mother, this project and the level of care and thought into building something that is compatible with the neighborhood, I hope came across for you. Their need to have a appropriate place for Jenny's mom is what drives most of what is being asked for here tonight. The balance we hope came across in the testimony from our planner and the architect are elements of this project that don't add to the traditional idea of bulk and massing, that in fact enhance the scale and enhance the visible appeal of this project to the neighborhood. Happy to hear the positive remarks from the neighbor directly next door. By relocating the driveway away from the other neighbor, we've created another benefit there. But from the planning perspective, and not to make light of the technical bulk variances that you heard about in depth and detail, and thank you for sitting through that. But the really core question here is, can the visual elements of this project that unfortunately cost FAR, are those appropriate for this neighborhood? And I think the testimony was that those are the elements that make this house appropriate for the neighborhood. And when you combine that with the almost penalty in coverage and floor area we amassed by bringing that garage to the back of the house, we are in the situation we're here today. So it's a family whose desire to have an age-in-place apartment, something that the code and our planning encourage, on a lot that technically becomes undersized when that happens, results in the need for these variances. And that, when combined, again, with the FAR elements that are not part of the house, they're not masses of the house. It's not examples like when you look at your code and see the way that an indoor two-floor atrium or two-floor family room is calculated. You count it twice because the code is concerned about the massing of that house, the box that's created by doing so. Here, these floor area elements aren't that. They're not creating a big box. They're not livable spaces, frankly. They are outdoor elements, the porte cochere, that breezeway or that covered walkway to get to the garage secondary unit. Those are not things that add visually to the mass or change character of the street. They actually, as you heard from testimony and from the neighbor, add to the benefits of a home that fits on this street. And while Chairman Cohen, you are absolutely correct that the floor area ratios are not regularly exceeded on the street. The testimony was that the actual floor area of this home is in keeping with it. And if you look at the purposes behind having floor area and a graduated floor area, that is to make sure that the homes built on a street are in keeping with the scale and the size and the visual massing that is appropriate for that street. And I hope you'll find that the testimony that you heard from our planner confirms that. So again, thank you for your time and very much appreciate you guys being here tonight.
You're welcome. Okay, let's discuss it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Bridger and Ms. Casey. It has to do with the floor area ratio concept and precedent. If, in effect, we're agreeing to this, are we saying anything that's essentially open air floor area ratio would, in the future, be bound by this decision? In other words, they wish us to say, well, it's not really floor area ratio because it's an open sort of thing. And I'm saying if we okay this, does that establish a precedent?
Well, I'll answer you this way, Mr. Stein. Each case is decided on its own facts, but certainly future applicants can raise that in this situation, if that's what the board decides to do, you were willing to discount certain floor area ratio because you like the design or you like this concept of transparency. I can't tell you that it's going to be a precedent. What I will recommend, though, is that since there are so many variances tonight, that in your deliberation you go through all of them. Some are more significant than others. This is presented to you as an entire package, but obviously the variances need to be balanced against the fact that it's a conforming lot right now. It becomes non-conforming because of the desire for the secondary residence. So if you find merit in this argument of transparent floor area, you can consider it. But I would just advise you to give careful thought to the concept and how it fits in with the application tonight. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but...
Okay, the second question is, approving this, could they then close this in and make it a regular part of the house? And that takes us to Mr. Bridger.
Well, if you were, just for example, an open porch that exceeds FAR is counted as FAR, you can close it in. I mean, there would be no prohibition against that.
Would you be able to tear this thing down and build an addition just to keep within the approved enhanced FAR?
I don't understand. I mean, another addition? I mean, they're at the cap. If they're way over the FAR now, I'm not sure.
No, I'm saying if this is approved and they wanted to enlarge their house and would do so by tearing down this walkway and using the additional FAR from that to build an addition, would they have to come back to us?
Well, would it be if they enclosed it as it is?
You could do that as of right.
Then they could do it as a right, but if they changed the configuration, if they decided to tear that covered walkway down and add it to a corner of the house, it would be a change that I think would require them coming back in, wouldn't it?
have to think about it a little more, but
We
I
may
would be
agree to that as
inclined to make it come back to the board because it's not what was approved to grant the FAR variance. I mean,
I'd say that the applicant would agree to a condition along those lines as well, that those spaces would not be enclosed, or that if there was some conversion to create this 7,500 square foot box, that we would absolutely come back for a different variance or leave in shame, because that's...
We can impose that condition?
We would agree to it. So whether you can impose it or not, we're happy to agree to that.
Ms. Casey, is that?
Someone else could do it.
That travels
going
with this
forward.
application? then?
No, it would go, if we're getting off topic here, but if they did say that they would never enclose it, that would go with the house if they sold it, is that correct? So nobody could enclose it.
yeah, but I mean, what are they going to enclose?
Well, that's it. I mean,
The
Blocking off
portico
the
share?
driveway, yeah.
the porch share,
The walkways to the garage? I don't think they're going to enclose any of that
From a
stuff.
practical standpoint, the only thing you can enclose is a walkway between the house and the garage, right? If you wanted to.
They could, yeah.
But then that's an increase in FAR, right?
It's already, it's
Oh, it's counted already, it's counted already.
I don't see that as a big issue.
But in terms of the design itself, and in terms of the neighborhood characteristic study and the idea of the master plan and what we want as a town, I think that this is in compliance. It looks like the rest of Battle Road. I mean, it's not that the frontage is excessive. I think the porte cochere and it's a very nice design where the garage is set back, and this is very much in keeping with kind of the new designs that have come out in the past year. And I think in other parts of Princeton, it would, of course, be too massive. But because Battle Road has other similar sized homes, and the frontage with the porte cochere, I think would look fine. I mean, I don't think it's out of keeping with the character. So in terms of that, I mean, sometimes you look at the numbers and, you know, I'd like to look at, like, what is the impact visually on the neighborhood and how is that going to affect the neighbors? And I'm glad to hear the neighbors are, you know, happy with it. So to me, it seems like it would make sense. So.
I actually differ from that a little bit in that I feel that we've been focusing on this, the additional residents and the addition of FAR to the FAR of the porte cochere. My French is bad. Anyway, where the carport is. And what strikes me is that the house is very large. And if it were not the size it is, that would be one thing you wouldn't have to come before us for, because the FAR would be in compliance, or could be. So.
Well, I mean, to further what Eve just said, I guess the question is, can you achieve everything you want to achieve in a house that would conform to the FAR, conform to the impervious coverage requirements, and require fewer variances? And that's the question I have.
I think I have a couple struggles with this. On the D variance, I guess the point you made too is you actually exceed the lot size for a single-family home. So you could build what you want within and not need a variance for lot size. It gets triggered by other things, and including the size of the building. The other thing I struggle with is if I was to approve the D variance, which is one thing, then I have contrary feelings on the lot area variance for a secondary residence. The code says you should have 25,000 square feet to build the secondary residence. Okay? And we'll let you build a secondary residence if you comply with this, this, and this. this application drops that square footage, which just is the basic thing, and says, but we're providing you with this. Well, that's the prerequisite for 25,000 square feet, for allowing the secondary residence. It's not a prerequisite for allowing you to do it on a smaller than 25,000.
Yes.
And that's a tough one for me, because I kind of respect the secondary residence. Yes, you have the right to do it. Just come with 25,000 square feet. That's what the town says. And the other part, and I do like the design. It is a bit long, but the elements that we're being asked to ignore are elements that the code counts. Okay?
Yeah.
They could have left those elements out if the town wanted to leave them out. They didn't. They did some adjustments within the code. So I'm almost being asked to, yeah, the elements are there, and yes, the codes say they count, but don't count them. Wait a minute, why? They're there.
Well, visually, they add to the bulk of the house. I mean, they're not going to disappear. I mean, the porte cochere, even though it has no walls, is a structure, and it's a significant structure. And the same with the garage. The garage may be pushed all the way back, but it is a large, tall garage and secondary residence or apartment. And so as you look down the driveway, you're looking through, you're seeing the mass. Again, this gets into an aesthetic discussion, which I really don't want to do, but you're looking through the mass of the porte cochere at this bigger garage that's beyond, and it appears that this house goes on. I mean, it adds to the visual bulk of the house. I also have a concern on the, I guess it would be the eastern property line. It's very close to the houses. It's where it is now, so I respect that. But when you do look at the two elevations, the existing and the proposed, the new house is, from a standpoint of bulk, significantly bigger, which I think will have a big impact, being 11 and a half feet away from the property line. So, and again, considering also you've got a lot of space on the western property line. So I have some concerns. I share Michael's concerns, and you know, it is an undersized lot in regards to the secondary residence. It can conform to all the criteria if there were no secondary residence and if there were no porte cochere, but those elements could exist if the house was small. So, I mean, there's trade-offs there. So that's why I said, you know, you know, you have to look at whether you can do everything you want within, you know, the criteria of the zone. So those are my concerns.
And I think one more thing for me is the impervious coverage. You know, whereas the first application, the amount of excess impervious coverage was very small. And it's a very small lot, but it was going to be like 70 square feet of being over. But on this one, I probably would have not approved the variance on impervious coverage. I see it different from, and also the first application has an existing house that was staying there.
Yeah.
So it couldn't be, yeah, we were allowing parking, but this is a complete rebuild. It could.
It's the impervious coverage is 20% over,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the impervious coverage I would have had. But you might be able to address that. But the other big ticket items.
Yeah, the impervious coverage is to me, the thing that can easily be addressed without substantial impact on what you're trying to achieve. I see a lot of ways of achieving that and still being able to maneuver. I do think that the design is doing a lot to address the massing and breaking things down in a way that reduces the impact, but it is still a substantial amount of square footage. I do think we have to go through item by item to kind of it's hard to have a methodical approach to the whole thing, seeing all these bits and pieces of which variants we're having.
One feeds on the
certain
other.
thoughts.
I mean,
Yeah,
They
yeah.
all add up. But, yes, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I think we hear what you're saying, and some of these things, especially with impervious coverage, could potentially be addressed if, I know we've completed our testimony in chief, but if the board would be amiable to us attempting to work through some of those things and returning, I think perhaps the applicant would try to find some ways to shave some of, certainly the coverage, and find some locations to deal with some of the other comments that you've made.
Mr. Kennedy, are you suggesting that the board should carry the application?
Sure. No, as long as they have a turnaround here. I mean, it looks
I
nice.
looked at it for this kind of, so they could have it just run there.
Yeah,
They
I
don't
mean,
need that.
I am asking that, and additionally, if, I know this is not a, we're using lots of French words today, but this is not a charrette necessarily, but I'd like, if, as much of your feedback I'd like to take back to their drawing board to make sure that we get this right for the board.
Well, Mr. Kennedy, just some things for the board to remember. I don't know when it will be carried, to what agenda. If all the same members are not here that night, then members who are not here will have to listen to the tape, which right now is a 2-hour tape. We can't promise you that there'll be 7 members at the next meeting whenever it's carried, and I can't tell you now what the mix is going to be of those members. So that's something just the board members need to keep in mind. So if you grant Mr. Kennedy's request, I don't think it can be with a promise that you'll all be here, all of you, at the next meeting at which it's carried, and that we necessarily will have 7 members that are available that night.
Well, that's at the
So-
option of the applicant.
Right.
He can make
Understood.
that decision.
Yes,
Sure.
Okay.
they may choose that versus a denial this evening, but yeah, understood.
When, I don't know what the agenda is like in September or October. Well, I mean, the alternative would be that
You
it
renotice
will
and
be
you
carried,
let
but it
us-
has to be renoticed,
You let
meaning
us know.
we
That's-
can't pick a date tonight yet, but the staff will tell you, okay, here's the next
Understood.
available date.
It's, you know, obviously, we always like to avoid renoticing, but that's not a heavy lift for us. That's not a problem.
So is that the board's consensus? Is that what you would like to do then? Carry the application, we don't have a date tonight, so that the
Well,
staff
I
can
would-
look at?
I mean, I would, in a sense, defer to the applicant. I mean, if you don't want us to vote this evening and you want to think about what we said, that's fine, and then we'll have to just, it'll be up to Derek to schedule a time when when we...
They should renotice. I mean, I don't want to get in a situation
No,
of...
they will, but the question is, you don't have a date tonight yet to give them.
I don't have a date. I mean, it could be September, but I don't know when your plans will be ready, and I'd like to look at the plans before they come back to the board, so I don't want to put a false deadline for myself or the board until, I mean, there's sufficient time to examine what they submit, and
I think that's fair enough. Sure.
Thank you for working with us on this, and yes, that is the request. We will renotice if we don't have a date to announce tonight. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we're adjourned.